My parents ignored my graduation to attend my cousin's engagement. So I mailed them a framed photo of my diploma, with a note that said, "Don't worry, she didn't show up either." Now they want a dinner to make it up to me. I'm busy with a TED Talk. I'm 26, and I just graduated with honors after 4 years that felt more like a marathon on broken legs. I wasn't coasting. I was surviving, juggling full-time classes, 2 part-time jobs, unpaid internships, and the kind of student debt that keeps you up at night doing math you don't want to face. My degree wasn't just academic. It was personal. It was the quiet, desperate answer to every time someone told me I was being too dramatic, too sensitive, too emotional when I asked to be seen, to be heard, to be important. Growing up, I learned pretty quickly that attention in my family was a currency, and I was always broke. My parents weren't absent, exactly. They were present when it was convenient. They showed up to school plays, parent-teacher nights, dance recitals, as long as nothing better came up. And in my family, something better usually meant someone else. Specifically, my cousin Alana. Alana has always been the family's crown jewel. Perfect smile, perfect hair, curated like an influencer before that was even a word. Her achievements, no matter how small, were broadcast like headlines. A community college certificate? Galas. A well-lit Instagram post? Praise across 4 family group chats. Meanwhile, my milestones were treated like background noise. Optional. Disposable. Still, I kept showing up. I kept trying. I kept hoping that this one time, it would be different. That they'd finally show up for me. So when my college graduation date was set, months in advance, I made sure they had every detail. I texted the exact time. Sent a formal invite. Helped them look at hotels. My mom even said, "We're so proud of you. We wouldn't miss it for the world." And then, 2 days before the ceremony, my dad called. His tone was light, casual, like he was moving around while on speakerphone. "Hey, just a quick heads up. Your mom and I won't be able to make it this weekend. Alana just got engaged and there's a whole dinner thing. Big deal, you know?" That was it. No apology. No hesitation. No sense of what the moment was. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I just said, "Okay." But it wasn't the kind of okay that invites a follow-up. It wasn't, "I understand." It was okay as in, "This was the last time I expected you to show up. And now I know exactly where I stand." Graduation morning felt still. Not peaceful. Not exciting. Just still, like the world had paused to see what I would do with all the disappointment I wasn't showing on my face. The sun was out. My gown was pressed. My cords were neatly folded on the hanger, a bright visual reminder of the all-nighters and early classes and the time I presented a senior thesis with a 101 degrees fever because I couldn't afford to miss the grade. It should have been a big day, was a big day, but it already felt like something was missing. No, not something. Someone. I didn't expect a parade. I didn't expect a skywriter or a marching band or even a card. But I thought they'd be there. After everything. After all the years I'd spent proving I was worth something more than a side note in someone else's story. My phone buzzed on the dresser. It wasn't a text from them. Just a photo in the family group chat, Alana, again. This time at some picturesque winery. Holding up her hand with a wide smile like she was auditioning for The Bachelor. My parents were in the background, laughing, wine in hand. My dad wearing the same shirt he wore to my high school graduation. I guess it was his celebration shirt. Just not for me. That photo, that single frame of joy that I wasn't a part of, hit harder than any fight we'd ever had. Because there it was, in bright pixels, the proof that they could show up. That they could be joyful. That they could celebrate someone. It just wasn't going to be me. I stared at it for a long time. Then I stood up, slowly put on my dress, and zipped up the gown over it. Tied the honor cords around my neck. Looked in the mirror and gave myself the smile I wasn't sure I believed. Not for the pictures, for the armor. The campus was buzzing with families. Moms crying into tissues, dads shaking hands too hard, siblings posing for selfies with cardboard cutouts of their graduating heroes. I saw balloons, flowers, "You did it." Signs, cousins holding up phones on Zoom for relatives who couldn't be there in person. I showed up alone. Sat by myself for check-in. Waited by myself for the procession. Lined up with my classmates, all of us jittery with nerves and pride. One of them asked, "Where are your folks sitting?" And I lied. I said, "Somewhere in the middle. I think they're stuck in traffic." I smiled when I said it. And the worst part? I said it automatically. Like I was protecting them. Still. The ceremony began. Names were read. Speeches made. One by one, students stood, walked, waved, and returned to the applause of people who had watched them grow up. I scanned the seats, even though I already knew. There it was. Row 12, seat 7. The one I'd picked weeks ago, right in the center aisle for a clear view. Reserved with a card I printed at the library. Left unclaimed. Empty. Like a missing piece in a puzzle only I cared enough to complete. When my name was called, I walked tall. Head up. Smile wide. I shook hands with the dean. Took the diploma. Turned for the camera. I did everything I was supposed to do, because I had earned that moment. Even if I had to clap for myself. As I returned to my seat, the cheers around me blurred into background noise. I looked once more at the empty chair. It hadn't moved. No one had taken it by mistake. It was still there, sitting in silent witness to what could have been a memory for them if they'd cared enough to show up. Afterward, friends invited me out. One offered to have their family take me to lunch with them. I smiled, made excuses. Said I had plans. I didn't. I went home. Took off the gown. Folded it neatly and placed it on the chair in my room, the only chair that had stayed filled for me all these years. Sat at my desk and opened my laptop. Found the best photo of the day, me in front of the university seal, diploma in hand, sun breaking behind me like a cinematic moment made for a movie I was starring in alone. I uploaded it to the photo center, chose a silver frame, typed my address. And then I added a note card. Blank except for a single sentence. Don't worry, she didn't show up either. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even feel sad anymore. What I felt was done. Not bitter. Not vengeful. Just finished. Like I'd finally arrived at a truth I'd spent years denying. That sometimes, the people you wait your whole life for will never be able to meet you where you are. So you stop waiting. And you keep walking. There's a certain calm that sets in after the final disappointment. It's not rage, not sadness, not even bitterness. It's a stillness, like your body has decided, that's it. We're done giving chances. That's what I felt the night after graduation, sitting alone in my room with my diploma on my desk and my cap folded neatly in my lap like a memory I was trying not to resent. There was no text from my mom. No voicemail from my dad. Not even a comment on social media. But the family group chat? Still buzzing. Pictures of Alana's ring from different angles. Someone captioned it a fairy tale beginning. Another aunt posted a boomerang of champagne flutes clinking. I had just completed a 4-year war with myself, anxiety, burnout, self-doubt, 3 a.m. panic attacks over grades, and they were out there celebrating an engagement like it was a royal coronation. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't waiting for them to suddenly remember what they'd missed. I just wanted them to see what they chose not to show up for. I pulled up the photo from earlier that day, the one my roommate had taken. I was standing in front of the university sign, the diploma in my hands, sunlight catching my face just right. You couldn't see the hollowness behind my smile, but I could. Still, it was a good picture. Strong. Proud. Alone, but not broken. I sent it to a local photo printing shop. Chose the best matte finish. Then I searched for a frame. Not something cheap or petty, no glitter, no sarcasm. Just a clean, elegant silver frame. The kind of frame you'd expect to see on a mantle, given with pride by someone who expected it to be cherished. And then came the note. I thought about writing something longer. Something poetic. Something that captured years of being the backup plan in a family that never seemed to have space for more than one star. But in the end, I kept it short. Simple. Sharp enough to cut without screaming. Don't worry, she didn't show up either. 12 words. That's all. I printed it in ink black script on heavy cardstock. Tucked it behind the photo, just visible enough behind the glass. Slid the frame into a box with care, like it was a gift, because, in a way, it was. A truth wrapped in satin. A moment they didn't deserve to witness in person, but could now stare at in silence. No return address. No tracking. Just sent directly to their doorstep with standard shipping and a signature required upon arrival. I didn't tell anyone I sent it. Not my roommate, not my friends, not my partner. It wasn't a performance. It wasn't a dramatic stunt. It was a boundary, mailed first class. 3 days later, the delivery confirmation popped up. Signed for by my mom. That night, my phone lit up for the first time in a week. A text. We didn't realize it meant that much to you. No punctuation. No apology. Just a weak attempt to dress up their absence in misunderstanding. I didn't respond. Because what was there to say? You didn't realize? Of course they realized. I had told them. I had sent the invitations. I had booked their hotel. I had given them the date, months in advance. They didn't forget. They chose someone else's milestone. And now they were trying to soften the reality of what that choice meant. An hour later, another text came through. Can we take you to dinner this weekend? We'd love to celebrate with you properly. I stared at it for a long time. And then I closed the message. I had dinner plans already. But they didn't know that. And they wouldn't. Because once someone shows you they won't clap for you when it's hard, you don't invite them to the encore. Guilt, when it finally arrived, didn't come as some grand apology. It didn't knock on my door with flowers or show up with tears and trembling hands. No. It came in the form of half-hearted texts, vague justifications, and a growing sense of awkwardness they were clearly hoping I'd be the one to dissolve. After I ignored the dinner invitation, they doubled down. First it was my mom, texting the next morning. You know we're proud of you, right? I didn't answer. Later that day. Alana's event just happened to fall on the same weekend. It wasn't personal. That one made me laugh. Not out loud, just that cold, quiet kind of laugh that lives at the edge of disbelief. Of course it wasn't personal. That was the problem. It was never personal when it came to me. I was always the afterthought. The optional one. By day 3, my dad tried calling. I let it ring. He left a voicemail I didn't bother to open. Then came the message from my aunt, the family's unofficial peacekeeper, asking if I could find it in my heart to let it go. They feel terrible, sweetheart. They didn't mean to hurt you. Your mom hasn't stopped talking about how beautiful you looked in the picture. She cried, you know. I didn't know. And I didn't care. Where were those tears when I stood alone in a crowd of proud families? Where was that love when I scanned the audience for a face that would never appear? Letting it go would mean erasing how deeply their absence cut. And I wasn't going to do that for their comfort. Not anymore. For the first time, I started to see the emotional gymnastics I'd done my whole life, twisting myself into someone smaller, quieter, easier to overlook so they could continue worshipping the version of family that required no reflection. Because it wasn't about the dinner. Or the photo. Or even the text. It was about a lifetime of being seen just enough to keep me around, but never enough to make me feel like I mattered. And now they were fumbling to rebuild a bridge I no longer wanted to walk across. They tried again. Can we do a dinner next week then? Maybe we can throw you a belated party? You didn't say anything earlier, how are we supposed to know this meant so much? That one made me clench my jaw. Because I had said something. Repeatedly. I had circled the date. Sent reminders. Made sure they had the tickets, the schedule, even the weather forecast. I had done everything short of drawing them a map labeled "This is important, please care." But they didn't. They cared after. After the photo. After the silence. After the realization that their absence couldn't be smoothed over with a dinner bill or a belated gift card. And by then, I was somewhere else entirely. Somewhere quieter. Stronger. Better. Not bitter, just finished. Because there's something freeing about no longer needing someone to change in order for you to grow. I had spent years thinking I needed them to finally see me so I could see myself. But now, without their validation, without their cheers, I had done it anyway. I had walked that stage. Earned that degree. Carved a future from the same silence they'd left me in for years. And I wasn't about to trade that peace for one more dinner where I'd be pretending we were okay. They were guilty now. But I was finally free. A few weeks after graduation, I got an email that made me stare at my screen in disbelief. Subject line. Speaker invitation, 10x panel on first-gen college graduates. At first, I thought it was spam. One of those AI-generated things. But it wasn't. It was real. A university-hosted TEDx event, themed around belonging. They had seen a blog post I wrote months ago for a student publication about what it means to build your own legacy without a blueprint, and they wanted me to speak. I read the email 5 times. Then once more, just to make sure the words hadn't rearranged themselves. Because here I was, the girl who spent 4 years fighting imposter syndrome, begging herself to feel worthy, now being invited to stand on a red circle and talk about everything she once cried over in the dark. I said yes, of course. But it wasn't a triumphant yes. It was quiet. Solid. Like I had finally met the version of myself I'd been trying to become for years, and she was calmly nodding, saying, "It's your turn now." I spent nights writing the talk. Rewriting. Editing. Scrapping it and starting again. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I wanted to get it exactly right. I wasn't just speaking for me. I was speaking for every first-gen student who had ever sat in an empty auditorium row. For every high achiever who faked a smile in their graduation photo. For every person who had succeeded alone. The day of the talk came fast. I was nervous, but not afraid. And when I stepped onto that red carpet, everything inside me went still, the right kind of still. Like I finally belonged somewhere, and no one could take it away from me. I opened with a question. What happens when the people you hoped would clap for you don't even show up? I talked about the weight of doing everything right and still being forgotten. About what it feels like to walk across a stage with no one in the crowd with your last name. About how we learn to survive without applause, and how some of us thrive in spite of it. I didn't name names. I didn't say my parents or my cousin or drag anyone through the mud. I didn't need to. Because the power wasn't in calling them out. It was in finally calling myself in. The silence in the auditorium was deep. Not uncomfortable, reverent. I could feel people breathing with me. Nodding. Some wiping away quiet tears. It was the first time I ever told that story out loud. And I did it not for closure, but for creation. For space. For meaning. For all the things I didn't get when I was younger but had now learned to give myself. When I finished, there was a pause. That half-second of pure stillness. And then the applause. Loud. Full. Real. A standing ovation, not because I had begged for it, but because I had earned it. Later that night, they uploaded the talk online. At first, it was just a few views. A few comments. But then someone shared it. Then another. Then it started to circulate in education spaces, mental health forums, student advocacy networks. Messages trickled in from strangers, students, single moms, immigrant kids, people who felt invisible and tired and unseen, all saying the same thing. I thought I was the only one. That's when I realized something. The people who didn't show up for me back then? They weren't the audience I needed anymore. I had found a new one. One that clapped without obligation. One that didn't need my silence to stay comfortable. One that wasn't related to me by blood, but by something deeper, shared truth. And when my phone buzzed again a few days later, this time with a message from my parents asking if we could try again over lunch. I didn't even open it. Because I had another message to answer, from a young girl in Nigeria who watched my talk and said she finally felt brave enough to apply to college. That's the dinner I showed up for. That's the applause I hear now. I never sent a response to my parents' latest message. I didn't delete it. I didn't block them. I just left it there. Floating. Untouched. A digital ghost of a conversation I wasn't willing to have again. Because here's the thing, I'm not angry anymore. I'm not sitting in my room replaying the missed graduation or crafting comebacks I'll never say out loud. I've made peace, just not the kind people expect. Not the kind that ends with a hug and a group photo at some forced family dinner. No, this peace is quieter. It came when I realized I no longer needed to convince anyone of my value. Least of all the people who refused to see it when it mattered most. I had already done the work, emotionally, academically, personally, to prove I could become someone without their applause. And now that I had, I wasn't going to shrink again just to make them comfortable. The framed photo still hangs in my apartment. Not out of spite. Not as a middle finger. But as a reminder. A reminder that I was there. That I stood tall. That I crossed the stage alone and smiled anyway. And most of all, that I stopped waiting. I used to think legacy was something passed down. Something inherited. But now I know better. Legacy is built. And mine won't be a family name etched on a plaque. It won't be heirlooms or shared recipes or Sunday dinners filled with quiet tension. My legacy is in every word I speak that someone else needed to hear. In every young person who watches that TED Talk and whispers, "Me too." In every empty chair I no longer try to fill with the people who never wanted to sit beside me in the first place. They offered to come visit. To fly out. To take me to dinner, again. I said I was busy. Which was true. I was flying out that weekend, not for family, but for myself. I was speaking again. Another event. Another room full of people who knew what it meant to build a life without a blueprint. Another audience who didn't need to know my last name to believe in my story. I packed my own bag. Booked my own flight. Walked into the terminal alone, this time not with heaviness, but with lightness. With purpose. With pride that wasn't waiting to be echoed. Because I wasn't trying to earn a seat at anyone's table anymore. I was building a new one. And the most beautiful thing? I get to choose who sits there.